Stay away from Ted. Nicole's jealousy reached a boiling point that no one in Fairmont Crest could ignore, and it was one of those days where the air itself seemed to hum with tension, the kind of tension that makes even the most composed residents fidget nervously as they sense that a storm is about to break. And it all began the moment she saw Shanice laughing a little too easily, leaning a little too closely toward Ted during the morning charity gala at the Crestwood Hotel, a gala that was supposed to be a celebration of community goodwill but quickly devolved into the stage for personal vendettas, whispered accusations, and burning glances. Nicole's lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tight as she clenched her fists inside the elegant glove she had chosen that morning, gloves that now felt like they were cutting her hands, a tangible reminder of the restraint she was trying and failing to maintain. And she could feel her heartbeat drumming in her ears like a warning siren as she followed Shanice out of the main ballroom, each step echoing against the polished marble floor, echoing with the weight of her unresolved feelings for Ted, for all the moments she had imagined she and Ted could have shared, for the life she thought they might still have, for the betrayal she felt even though part of her knew that her jealousy was as much about fear as it was about logic. A fear that Ted's attention to Shanice might rekindle the fire of old wounds, old promises, old intimacy, and Nicole's mind raced faster than her feet could carry her, her thoughts a jumble of past heartbreaks, whispered reassurances that had fallen flat, and the persistent sting of watching Ted smile at someone else, someone younger, someone vibrant, someone who clearly reminded him that he was alive and free in ways Nicole hadn't realized he had been for years. And as she caught up to Shanice near the ornate fountains in the hotel's courtyard, the sound of the water splashing against stone like the ticking of a clock counting down to an inevitable confrontation, Nicole's voice cut through the ambient chatter of guests milling around the courtyard like a whip, sharp and unyielding. "Shanice, stay away from Ted," she said, each word carefully measured but loaded with a kind of venom that only jealousy, only fear of loss, could summon, and Shanice, taken aback, her laughter vanishing as if someone had pulled the plug on a cheerful melody, looked up with wide eyes, a mix of shock and disbelief. "Nicole, what are you talking about?" she asked, but the calm she tried to muster was immediately shattered by Nicole stepping closer, her presence looming like a shadow over Shanice, the afternoon sun catching in her carefully styled hair and casting a glow that made her look almost ethereal, yet deadly, like a storm disguised as a summer day, and Nicole's voice softened just enough to seem conciliatory, almost reasonable, but it was a trap, a siren song of warning that left Shanice reeling. "I'm talking about my husband, the man you're flirting with, as if you don't know how dangerous that is for you." And as the words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, a hush fell over the courtyard, the guests sensing the tension, sensing the collision of old relationships and fresh desires, sensing that this wasn't just a momentary spat, but a spark that could ignite the powder keg of past betrayals, unspoken truths, and simmering rivalries that had defined Fairmont Crest for decades. And Shanice, recovering her composure, took a step back, trying to inject reason into the charged atmosphere. "Nicole, we're just talking," she said, but Nicole's eyes narrowed, dark with a storm of emotion she couldn't contain. "Talking? That's what you call talking?" Laughing in his face, touching his arm. "I've known Ted longer than you've been in this town, longer than you've known your own heart, and I will not let you toy with him, with us, with everything we've been through." And she took another step closer, and it was the kind of proximity that made Shanice feel cornered, trapped in the orbit of someone whose intensity could both captivate and terrify, and Nicole's hands trembled just slightly, betraying the storm within, as she forced herself to keep her voice steady. "I'm warning you, Shanice, if you care at all about yourself, about the consequences of getting involved with someone like Ted when he's already mine, then you'll walk away now, before things get ugly." And with that final word, her gaze pierced Shanice like a knife, sharp and unyielding, leaving no room for negotiation, leaving Shanice to weigh her next move against the raw, searing energy radiating from Nicole, energy born from heartbreak, from longing, from jealousy so potent it could bend the air itself. And as Shanice's lips parted to respond, Nicole turned abruptly, her heels clicking against the marble, the sound like a drumbeat of warning echoing through the courtyard, a signal that she was leaving the choice to Shanice, but also daring her to make the wrong one. And as Nicole disappeared around the corner, Shanice stood frozen, caught between fear and fascination, admiration and caution, her mind spinning with the realization that Nicole's love, possessive, consuming, unrelenting, was not something to be underestimated. And somewhere down the avenue, Ted, unaware of the storm that had just erupted around him, continued his conversations, oblivious to the silent war waging over him, unaware that his past and present were about to collide in ways that would send shockwaves through Fairmont Crest, that alliances would shift, secrets would be exposed, and that the simple act of Nicole warning Shanice to stay away was just the opening salvo in a battle that would leave no one unscathed. For in a town like Fairmont Crest, love and jealousy were twin forces that could ignite the most spectacular conflagrations, and Nicole, walking away with her back straight, her chest heaving with the adrenaline of confrontation, knew that this was only the beginning, that every choice, every glance, every word spoken in the coming days would ripple outward like the fountains in the courtyard, and she was prepared to fight, to manipulate, to schematically outmaneuver anyone who dared come between her and Ted, for she understood that in the world of Beyond the Gates, emotions were weapons, desire was strategy, and jealousy was an armor forged from the deepest vulnerabilities. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the marble, Nicole's silhouette merged with the encroaching twilight, a warning to all who might challenge her, a promise that she would stop at nothing to protect what she claimed. And as Shanice finally recovered her voice, a whisper barely audible, "I didn't mean." The words were swallowed by the growing tension, the unresolved drama hanging over the courtyard like a storm cloud ready to break, leaving the residents of Fairmont Crest to wonder how long it would be before this confrontation escalated, before hearts were broken, allegiances tested, and secrets spilled. And little did they know that the ripples from this moment, this seemingly simple warning to stay away, would reverberate across families, friendships, and the very foundation of the town itself, turning what began as jealousy into a catalyst for chaos, manipulation, betrayal, and heartbreak that would dominate the lives of Nicole, Ted, Shanice, and everyone who dared to get caught in the crossfire of passion, power, and pride in the unforgiving, unpredictable world of Beyond the Gates, where love was a battlefield, trust was a weapon, and one jealous heart could set the entire town ablaze. And as night fell over Fairmont Crest, shadows stretching long and ominous, Nicole's words lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed the scene, the echo of "stay away from Ted" resonating with a chilling clarity, promising that the drama was far from over, that the games of love, obsession, and control had only just begun, and that in this town, nothing, not loyalty, not friendship, not even family ties, was safe from the fires ignited by a single, fiery warning whispered in jealousy's name. Shanice's knees felt weak, though she forced herself to stand tall, the marble fountain reflecting her wavering resolve as droplets of water sparkled like tiny diamonds around her, almost mocking the storm brewing inside. She could still feel Nicole's glare burning into her back, a silent threat more terrifying than any words could convey, and though Shanice tried to rationalize, to tell herself that Ted was an adult who could make his own choices, her heart was pounding with the knowledge that Nicole's jealousy was not just a fleeting emotion, it was a weapon, sharp and precise, capable of slicing through anyone foolish enough to challenge her, and Shanice suddenly understood why people in Fairmont Crest whisper Nicole's name with a mixture of awe and fear, why even the strongest men found themselves second-guessing their loyalties, and yet, despite the danger, Shanice couldn't help the flutter of excitement, that dangerous thrill of standing on the edge of a game she had not intended to play but was now deeply entangled in, a game where every glance, every word, every gesture carried consequences that could ripple across weeks, months, even years, for in this town, nothing happened without consequences, and the residents of Fairmont Crest had learned that the hard way. Meanwhile, in another wing of the Crestwood Hotel, Ted was blissfully unaware of the tension swirling around him, laughing with colleagues and shaking hands with benefactors, his charming smile lighting up the room. But even as he enjoyed the mundane politics of philanthropy, his phone buzzed in his pocket, a small, almost innocuous vibration that he ignored at first, until another buzz prompted him to finally check it, only to see a cryptic text from Nicole that made his chest tighten, reading simply, "Do not test me. Stay away from me." And he felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach, a warning shot across the bow of his otherwise calm afternoon, making him wonder exactly what storm he had unwittingly walked into, and whether his past choices, his lingering feelings for Nicole, and the presence of Shanice had just triggered a chain reaction he was completely unprepared for, because in Fairmont Crest, nothing ever stayed simple for long. Back in the courtyard, Shanice tried to steady her breathing, her mind racing as she weighed her options, realizing that any step she took now would be scrutinized not only by Nicole, but by the invisible eyes of the town's social network, those ever-watchful neighbors, friends, and enemies alike who thrived on scandal and whispered gossip. She thought of Ted, the way he had looked at her during their conversation earlier, the light in his eyes that made her heart skip, and she had to admit, despite her better judgment, despite the looming threat of Nicole's wrath, she had enjoyed it. The attention, the connection, the forbidden thrill of catching the eye of a man clearly bound by history to someone else, and Shanice realized that navigating this minefield would require every ounce of subtlety and cunning she could muster, for one wrong move could not only ruin her chances with Ted but also place her squarely in Nicole's crosshairs, a position no one who valued their sanity in Fairmont Crest would ever voluntarily occupy. Meanwhile, word of the confrontation had begun to circulate, whispered first among hotel staff, then quietly in the lobby by hotel guests who had caught the tail end of Nicole's warning, and soon enough, the rumor spread through Fairmont Crest like wildfire, igniting side conversations in coffee shops, boutiques, and salons, each retelling more dramatic than the last, the story evolving into a legend in its own right. Nicole, the jealous ex-wife, issuing a menacing warning to Shanice, a newcomer who dared to flirt with Ted, the man whose heart and history were already complicated enough without the interference of this latest drama, and soon enough, other key players in the town began to take notice. Marcel, who had his own history with Nicole and Ted, observing from the shadows with a calculating eye, wondering what opportunities or threats this confrontation might present. Leslie, always attuned to the undercurrents of power and emotion in Fairmont Crest, sensing that the tension between Nicole and Shanice could be leveraged in ways that served her own schemes, and even Anita, quietly sipping her tea in her drawing room, pondering the ripple effects of jealousy and desire that had once again disrupted the fragile equilibrium of the town. By late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long, ominous shadows across the hotel's courtyard, Nicole returned to her suite, her mind racing, replaying every moment of her confrontation with Shanice, analyzing Shanice's expressions, calculating every possibility, weighing every threat, and already beginning to formulate her next moves, because Nicole knew that in Fairmont Crest, hesitation could be fatal, and she was never one to leave things to chance, especially when it came to Ted, the man she had loved, lost, and refused to relinquish, even if it meant stepping into darker, more dangerous emotional territory, a place where most would falter but Nicole thrived, for passion, after all, was her weapon, and jealousy was her armor, and she would wield both with surgical precision, no matter the cost. By nightfall, the stage was set. Nicole, fiery and determined, ready to protect what she claimed as hers. Shanice, cautious yet intrigued, standing at the edge of temptation. Ted, oblivious yet central to the conflict, poised unknowingly at the eye of the emotional hurricane, and Fairmont Crest itself, watching, whispering, and waiting for the next move in a game of desire, deception, and dangerous love where no heart would remain unscathed, and as the first stars blinked into existence over the cresting rooftops, the tension thickened like storm clouds, promising a collision of wills, a battle of hearts, and a chain of events that would set in motion betrayals, secrets, and confrontations that could alter the course of everyone's lives and beyond the gates. Because in a town ruled by passion, jealousy, and ambition, one warning, one simple, scalding declaration to stay away from Ted was enough to ignite chaos that would burn far beyond anyone's control. As night settled over Fairmont Crest, the echoes of Nicole's warning still reverberated in the minds of those who had witnessed the confrontation, and though she sat in her suite, staring out at the city lights twinkling like distant promises of power and revenge, her mind raced faster than her pulse, replaying Shanice's wide-eyed shock, the slight tremor in her voice, the way she had taken a subtle step back. And Nicole knew instinctively that the newcomer had felt the weight of her possessive intensity, that the seeds of fear and respect had already been planted, but Nicole wasn't content to leave things there, not when her emotions, her pride, and her claim to Ted were all at stake, and so she began to plot, pacing back and forth across the marble floors of her suite, considering every possible way to remind Shanice that she was treading on dangerous ground, imagining the carefully calculated conversations, the perfectly timed appearances, the subtle manipulations that would ensure Shanice learned her place without openly igniting a scandal, though in Fairmont Crest, such a thing was almost impossible, for secrets had a way of escaping, whispers had wings, and even the best-laid schemes were often twisted by chance and human frailty. Meanwhile, Ted had finally glanced at his phone, reading Nicole's terse message over and over, his stomach twisting as he tried to process the storm he had unwittingly walked into, recalling the warmth in Shanice's smile, the easy laughter they had shared, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief and curiosity, and contrasting it against years of history with Nicole, the moments of passion, of heartache, of shared memories that were etched into his very being, making him realize with a sickening clarity that he was at the center of a perfect storm, a conflict that could unravel not only his relationship with Nicole, but also the delicate social fabric of Fairmont Crest, where every flirtation, every glance, every whispered word was magnified, judged, and dissected by a populace hungry for drama. And as Shanice retreated to her own apartment, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and calculations, she replayed Nicole's glare and words, the way her voice had carried that intoxicating mix of rage and warning, and though a part of her wanted to retreat, to vanish from Ted's orbit and avoid the wrath of a woman so clearly capable of emotional warfare, another part of her, the more daring part, felt a dangerous pull toward the man caught in the middle, a pull she couldn't deny, a temptation that made her pulse race and her instincts sharpen, forcing her to think strategically, to anticipate Nicole's moves, to plan how she could protect herself, while also keeping a foothold in the complicated emotional triangle that had formed almost overnight, and she knew instinctively that one wrong move could brand her as the enemy in a town where reputations were fragile, loyalties were fickle, and vengeance was a pastime. Even as the night deepened, Marcel sat alone in his study, fingers steepled, eyes narrowed as he considered the confrontation from a distance, aware that Nicole's warning to Shanice could serve as an opportunity for him, a way to manipulate events to his advantage, to sow confusion, to leverage jealousy and ambition against those who underestimated him, while Leslie, from her penthouse suite, sipped her wine with a calculating smirk, recognizing that the tension between Nicole and Shanice was a weapon she could use to further her own schemes, to redirect attention, to expose vulnerabilities, and even Anita, quietly observing the unfolding drama through her social contacts, understood that the ripples from Nicole's fiery words would soon touch everyone in Fairmont Crest, that the delicate web of alliances, secrets, and unspoken desires was about to unravel in ways no one could predict. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, the town itself seemed to hold its breath, the streets empty yet alive with expectation, the shadows long and watchful, as though Fairmont Crest itself sensed that something monumental was brewing, that the collision of passion, jealousy, and desire was inevitable, and in that charged atmosphere, Nicole, seated at her vanity brushing her hair, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, knowing she had staked her claim, that she had issued her warning, that the gauntlet had been thrown, and now it was a matter of watching, waiting, and striking at Precisely the right moment, because in a town like Fairmont Crest, timing was everything, and in a game of hearts, only the bold, the cunning, and the relentless would survive, while Ted, unaware of the scheming and plotting now swirling around him like a storm, fell asleep that night with a sense of uneasy calm, a calm that was as fragile as the alliances and emotions in Fairmont Crest. And as the stars above twinkled coldly in the night sky, the first subtle moves of a dramatic power play were already in motion, the stage perfectly set for confrontations, betrayals, and heart-shattering revelations that would leave no one unchanged, no one untouched, and no one safe in the world of Beyond the Gates, where a single warning, "Stay away from Ted," could ignite a series of events destined to consume the lives of everyone it touched. And as the night deepened, Nicole's words lingered like a shadow over Shanice, over Ted, and over the entire town, a silent promise of chaos, conflict, and the explosive drama that would define the coming days in Fairmont Crest, where love was a battlefield, jealousy was ammunition, and every heartbeat to the rhythm of danger and desire.